I appreciate your peers for joining us today. So I'll go ahead and start with the docket. Again, I'd like to thank our guests for joining today. We will be ringing the bell for Salvation Army next Friday, December 18th. We were out last week, this past Friday. It was a beautiful day, lots of traffic. They had us set up just outside, which was fine. When I came to take over at 4, the bucket was full. So that was a nice indicator that the generosity is still alive and well, and that location at 71st and Binford continues to treat us well. So I believe our spreadsheet is full. We filled those slots for bell ringers next Friday, and thanks again for everybody for volunteering. Our Perry Meridian High School Key Club donated the remainder of their 2020 grant of $865 to the Salvation Angel Tree program this year, benefiting 17 more children. So that continues to be a great partnership with downtown Kiwanis and Salvation Army. Our foundation board has approved $29,000 in community grants to be awarded to 12 different organizations. Expect more details in our newsletter. We have been on Zoom since March, and we are hoping to meet in person starting in January 2021, the second Thursdays of each month, and remain on Zoom for the other Thursdays. We'll stay in touch and hopefully get to see you in person on January 14th. There's a link to PayPal available in our weekly newsletters. If you could please consider making a gift to the club in lieu of paying for lunch. Any amount is appreciated. And again, thanks to our guests for joining today. And I will turn it over to my better half, Lamita Steele, who will introduce today's speaker, Doug Hemmig from C-SPAN.
It is my pleasure as a fellow newsie to introduce you to Doug Hemmig. You know, with so many stations and networks being cast as having this point of view or this society view, C-SPAN prides itself on just putting a camera in the on the Senate floor and letting you just see the whole span of it without commentation or without meteors interfering, and you taking away what you want to from it. It's a hard concept to have, especially with our kids who like to comment on everything that they see going on in our household, and trying to teach them to just fermer la bouche, or, you know, open your ears, close your mouth, open your eyes, and take it all in, and you might learn something. So C-SPAN really does an excellent job, I have to say, of just presenting it and letting the viewers take it in, as well as helping the community. So I'm thrilled to have the other part of the news industry join us today, this afternoon, and I'll let you take it away from there, Mr. Doug Hemmig.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lamita, Eric, and Taylor for having us today. I'm sorry we can't be in Indianapolis because, believe me, we would love to. That's my old stomping grounds. I used to live up on 86th Street at Keystone, the Crossing. And as I mentioned to some of the folks before you got on, a lot of folks got on the call. I was a Kiwanian in the Broad Ripple Club a long time ago. So I had family in the area. I love Indianapolis. So thank you guys for what you do for the city as Kiwanians. And I say former Kiwanian because I'm a Rotarian now. Don't hold that against me. But my good friend is the president of the local Rotary Club here, so he dragged me in. But I still really appreciate what you guys do. I thought today what we would do is kind of start by taking a look back and look back in time, if you will. I think some of you will remember that television was once 3 giant networks and a government-supported channel called PBS. But back in 1979, our network had an unusual name, and we kind of rolled out a big idea. Our philosophy was that we wanted to let you decide all on your own what was important to you. So what our network did was we opened the doors to Washington policymaking, bringing you unfiltered content from Congress and beyond. And then in the 41 years since, I think we can all agree that the media landscape has clearly changed, but we think you'll find that our big idea is more relevant today than ever. It's really these unprecedented times that kind of demand an unconventional approach to political news coverage, and that's kind of why we're there. And today, I thought I'd share with you the ways that C-SPAN, both on television and online, can be a powerful media resource for you that's widely trusted. We have a wealth of easy to access tools for following the day's events, and all that allows you to be a better informed participant in our democracy. So really, underpinning our nonpartisan coverage of Washington and nation's politics is the fact that no government money supports C-SPAN. And I just want to say that again, no government money supports C-SPAN. It's actually funded as a public service by your cable and satellite provider. Because really the bottom line is that we're there for you. Just giving you something different in today's media so that you can make up your own mind. Now, before we dive in, I want to point out that my colleague April is on the call, and you will be muted, but feel free to type any questions in the chat section at the bottom of your screen. And then near the end, April and I will answer as many questions as possible. I'll also send an email out to you later today or tomorrow, just on ways you can stay connected. And more, if you have other questions, feel free to keep in touch off of that email. So we're happy to answer any questions, even offline. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. If you think about it, throughout our history, our democracy has faced many serious challenges, but I don't know that we've ever faced so many at once. I mean, just in 2020, we've seen the emergence of the worst pandemic in 100 years, an extremely volatile economy and job market, widespread social unrest unfolding across the country, one of the most consequential fire and hurricane seasons we've had in years, and you throw in the presidential and congressional elections like none other in our history. But really, as we move into 2021 with a new administration in Congress, we feel that more than ever, people are looking to their elected leaders to see how they're going to address all the issues facing the nation. And hopefully today I can show you why C-SPAN should be one of your networks you turn to, so that you can see how your public officials are responding to the pressing matters in their own words, but also more importantly, see how their actions and policies are affecting you and your community. So I want to talk about how C-SPAN today is different. We're purposely different. Now let's talk about what that means, and more importantly, what that means for you. Let's talk about how you can use our unfiltered coverage and resources to view today's events and engage with news and newsmakers in ways that other media doesn't provide. Many of you may already know this, but C-SPAN doesn't attempt to tell you what to think. We're kind of unique to television in that we simply put you in the room where the most important political and policy issues are being discussed and debated. And what this does, it allows you to watch these events in their entirety and think for yourself and make up your own mind. So I want to talk a little bit more about how C-SPAN is purposely different. And to do that, let's look at our business model, our unique perspective on public affairs news, and how our mission makes our coverage look a lot different from other media outlets. Because if you think about it, 4 decades, that's a long time for a cable news channel. In fact, we were serving the public even before CNN and ESPN launched, and more than a decade before the other cable news networks even started. But in that time, it's important to note that we've never veered from our core public service mission. We're uncommon in the media business as a nonprofit, independent enterprise. The industry supported and launched this service back in 1979. And as I said earlier, contrary to many people's thinking, our funding does not come through the federal government. To this day, we're actually funded through the fees paid by the cable and satellite company that distributes television into your homes. And I believe out there, well, it is Spectrum out there in Indianapolis, as well as other outlets. But the key thing is this funding model allows C-SPAN to be mission-driven rather than by TV ratings. And that means everything to us. Because we talk a lot about our mission, I want to take a closer look how our mission's carried out by what we do. Because for us, the events and the people we cover, that's the focus. C-SPAN provides long-form programming, meaning we show events from start to finish without interruption or editing, whether it's a 12-hour debate or a 20-minute press briefing. We show balanced coverage, providing multiple viewpoints, giving you a chance to hear from experts across the spectrum who provide perspective and help you better understand the issues. Because it's not about us. In fact, C-SPAN, many of you may not realize this, we don't provide commentary ourselves. It's the lawmakers, decision makers, and journalists who create, influence, and report on public policy that provide the perspective. Our philosophy is C-SPAN stays out of the way, giving our viewers direct access. So what we do is we invite viewers to participate in the discussion on social platforms, but also live on TV by allowing you to call in to share your thoughts or ask your questions on whatever topic's being debated. And a lot of times our callers act as the opposing point of view, and that's different than other networks. Not better, just different. So how does C-SPAN's mission guide us to the events you'll be watching? Well, you may already be familiar in some ways, but we do provide unparalleled coverage of Congress with live gavel-to-gavel coverage of floor proceedings from the U.S. House of Representatives on C-SPAN and the U.S. Senate on C-SPAN 2. But we also cover committee hearings where decisions are made about the issues that affect your life. And I don't just mean the blockbuster events, but also the day in and day out inner workings of our national legislature. For example, here's a recent coronavirus and economic recovery hearing involving Federal Reserve Chairman Powell and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, just to give you a small sample of what you might see on one of these networks. And we go deep into the corridors of the Capitol to show you briefings by congressional leaders in both the House and the Senate, as well as influencers in Congress. And that's whether it's the Congressional Black Caucus or the Freedom Caucus, shown here. Now, between now and the new year, Congress will continue to debate major spending legislation regarding the pandemic and funding the government, and we'll cover that as well. But you can also watch as the 117th Congress takes shape over the next couple of months, from new member orientation to their swearing in early January. Now, our coverage of the executive branch includes nearly all public events, meetings, and briefings at the White House, as well as many other briefings from other officials in the different departments. It's also important to note we're covering the transition as President-elect Biden announces appointments to top positions in his administration. And this is my favorite, and though the Supreme Court doesn't allow cameras in the court itself, we air audio major cases, including live coverage of oral arguments, since the court was forced to go virtual due to the pandemic. We actually welcome this access to the court and hope it continues and even expands after the pandemic is over. So here you can see we covered the recent Affordable Care case that made a lot of headlines and continues to make headlines. But we also covered the entire nomination process of new Supreme Court Associate Justice Barrett, from her announcement, her multiple days of Senate testimony, to her swearing in, and now her first cases she's hearing as a justice. C-SPAN covers it all. Now, when you think of C-SPAN, our programming focuses mostly on what's going on in the federal government. But to provide our viewers more perspective, we often cover state officials, showing how they're handling national issues on the local level. Your Governor, Eric Holcomb, he's been on C-SPAN 23 times discussing issues important to Hoosiers, including his recent coronavirus briefing that we covered on C-SPAN. We cover a lot of state briefings on the virus. But beyond our coverage of elected officials, C-SPAN covers many events of national and international importance. And that's whether it's a funeral of a national leader like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a NASA space launch, or even a timely, relevant debate like our weekly coverage of Prime Minister questions from the British House of Commons. And if you haven't watched that, I encourage you to do that. It's a lot of fun. Very different than our Congress, but just as entertaining, if not more. C-SPAN's well known for our campaign coverage. We actually covered the entire 2020 campaign for Congress and the White House in our signature unfiltered way. And we'll continue to be there as the process moves forward, from the Electoral College certification up until inauguration on January 20th. Now, of course, all eyes currently are on Georgia as the two Senate races go to runoff elections January 5th, which will decide the balance of power in the U.S. Senate, and we'll cover those activities as well. So I think by now you can kind of see that placing a camera in the room where the discussions and debates take place, that's really C-SPAN's bread and butter. But we like to give you a fuller context for the decisions being made. And we also like to get past the talking points. So what we do is we go beyond coverage of events. And to add this context, we have call-in programs like the Washington Journal, where decision makers and journalists answer viewer questions and discuss what's happening in the news. For example, here's your Attorney General, Curtis Hill, who came aboard the C-SPAN bus that was parked outside the Capitol, and he discussed issues relevant to Hoosiers. Now, this took place during our 50 Capitals tour. That tour was a lot of fun because we traveled to all 50 states and did live interviews on board our mobile production studio. And yes, we did go to Alaska and Hawaii with the bus. But needless to say, I was on the Indiana trip, so that was a lot of fun. We air in-depth discussions with authors through our weekly Q&A and book TV programming. We also feature lectures and firsthand accounts of historical events on American History TV, such as this program where our C-SPAN Cities tour visited Indianapolis to take a tour of the Capitol and learn about the history of the building and the city. And this came from tour guide Jim Johnson. So you can see we actually have a lot of great content from Indianapolis. Of course, we were founded by Hoosiers, so maybe it has something to do with that. But we'll put that link in the chat section to show you how you can access other local Indy content that may be on C-SPAN. But we also show experts as they debate solutions to public policy issues during forums at a diverse array of think tanks and advocacy organizations. Now, I know you guys have heard a lot of discussion about the role of news media in our society today, as we all have, and you often hear the term fake news. But in the middle of all this, C-SPAN's widely recognized and credited by others as being factual, neutral, and trusted. Now, as you can see in this chart, was actually created by the media watchdog Ad Fontes. C-SPAN ranks at the top for our production of factual content and right in the center for our neutrality. We're actually very proud of that. And this really has been our journalistic goal for 40 years, just by providing viewers a front row seat to our democracy in action. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our programming, our place in the chart probably comes as no surprise, but those less familiar kind of hope this provides some credible perspective on our role in the media. Now, before we get to your questions, I want to share how you can access our content. First of all, we have 3 television channels dedicated to providing live public affairs programming. Kind of hard to remember, so stay with me. C-SPAN, C-SPAN 2, and you guessed it, C-SPAN 3. We're very creative with our naming. You can also find us online at cspan.org. That's our video-rich website with live access to each day's coverage. And then everything we cover is then available for on-demand viewing. Now, our website features a free video library with over 260,000 hours of our programming and growing each day. That's a lot of content. These online programs, what's great about that is that they can be watched in their entirety. Or for quick viewing, we feature points of interest that jump to the highlights within the entire event. If you want to make your own clips and share it, you can do that too. Now, cspan.org's Congressional Chronicle gives you detailed information on what's happening in the House and Senate. This is actually where you'll find a unique page for every member of Congress, with the committees they sit on, their voting record, bills they've sponsored, and much more. For example, here's a page of your local member of Congress, current Congressman Andre Carson. You can see his 160 appearances, including his recent House floor appearances. But you can also search for his positions on a variety of topics like healthcare and taxes. It's a great research tool. In fact, my daughter is at the University of Maryland right now, and she's upstairs and she uses it quite often in one of her government classes. So if you get a chance, take a look at it. But our website also features a full page dedicated to the government's response to the coronavirus. You can stay up to date on conversations taking place in the administration, in Congress, and on the state level. And you can get the latest in the virus spread through our site's interactive maps and charts. Many people don't know this as well, but if you want to stay informed while on the go, use our free C-SPAN radio app, which is your free one-stop shop for a live stream of C-SPAN radio, audio from our 3 television networks, and a wide variety of podcasts. And make sure you follow C-SPAN on Twitter for timely content. Engage with the topics of the day on our Facebook page, and follow us on Instagram for features and peeks behind the scenes. And you can visit our YouTube page for even more video highlights. Now, before you go to the newsletter report, I forgot to mention the important section back there. I apologize for that. I got distracted here with my dog going crazy, but you saw an education page that popped up there. If you know an educator, C-SPAN Classroom is a free service we offer to teachers. We have lots of free lesson plans, video clips, and a documentary competition we have every year. And that's called Student Can, where students can actually earn up to $5,000 for making a video about something they'd like to see the government focus on the upcoming year. And I'm happy to talk more about that during our Q&A as well. So sorry I glossed over that, but it's certainly, if you know teachers, it's a great content for you as well. But if you're also like me and you like to get your news by email, we have a variety of newsletters you can sign up for, including Word for Word. And that kind of cuts through the daily news clutter and gives you a synopsis of political happenings. We have a programming guide with daily scheduling information and our weekly newsletters with previews of what's going to be on Book TV and American History TV that upcoming weekend. So hopefully during this, you can see that we've stayed true to our mission while expanding to serve our audience in innovative ways with fresh concepts, not for digital platforms, but also on many different devices. But as the C-SPAN teams, as we work together to provide this service, it's really the comments from our viewers, everyday Americans, influencers, and leaders who value C-SPAN that strengthens our resolve to remain purposely different.
That C-SPAN is a mirror of our country. They are unique in this brilliant model, and all they do is hold up the mirror so we can see ourselves.
So I say this every time I'm on. For your view, I've spent 20 years in that building behind you there covering it, and I could not do that job without C-SPAN. It is, for your viewers, as somebody who spends his day watching this stuff, they're all seeing it exactly as we see it inside that building. It's an amazing resource, so God bless C-SPAN.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for being available for the public to give us direct, unfiltered, unopinionated news.
First, I'd like to say I've been watching you guys for over 35 years, and I want to thank you so much for being on my cable stations. It's a pleasure when I watch your congressional hearings and watch the whole thing. And then I watch the news and how they report it and see how it differs. So I want to thank you guys very much for being one of the few stations out there that gives us real information.
Let me just also echo what so many of your callers have said. I want to thank C-SPAN. It is so refreshing to be able to turn on the television and watch an event, and I watch Republican events too, and be able to do it without a lot of talking heads tell you what you've just seen or to interpret what was just said. I think the American people are smart enough to figure things out themselves without having everybody tell them what they heard or what they just saw or to interpret what was just said. So I want to thank C-SPAN.
So there you have it. And we realized, April and I realized that just based off this 20-minute presentation, we're not going to be your only source of public affairs news, nor should we. But we kind of hope our time together showed you how we can be an important complement to other news sources. Appreciate your time and hope you learned a little bit more about how C-SPAN fits in the modern media landscape. And that is by following the principles of our big idea, letting viewers decide all on their own what's important to them, opening the doors to Washington policymaking for all to see, and bringing you unfiltered content from Congress and beyond. And also, nowadays, serving it to you on any of the devices you go to for news and information. We really feel that our big idea is more relevant today than ever. So April, let's take a look at any questions we might have that are in the chat room.
I see one question from Richard. It says, the Senate tends to be considered grander than the House. How did the Senate land on C-SPAN 2 instead of the House?
Richard, that's a good question. It's actually, the House of Representatives came on in 1979. We were first. The House was first to come on. And the Senate was, like you said, they're a little more deliberative about everything, and they were adamant about no way we're gonna this is not gonna happen. We don't want the cameras in the Senate chambers. But what happened was folks would go back, congressmen would go and congresswomen would go back to their districts during holiday parades and gatherings, and people would recognize them and like, wow, this, the Congress. So the senators actually they would get upset. Like, why are these folks being recognized? We're the senators. And so there really was not a sense of jealousy, but a sense of, hey, this is an opportunity for us to get our message out more. So they started 7 years prior, they started seeing how it worked in the House. So they saw the value of it, and they actually came back to the table in 1986 because of the influence that that was given on the House floor, that they then allowed cameras to be in the Senate chamber. So it took a while for them, being the grander, more deliberative body, which is understandable, but they saw, fortunately for us and for the country, they saw the value of it, and they came on board in 1986. So it was really not, I wouldn't say dragging and screaming, but they did see that they could use it to get their message out as well.
Okay, and then I see one more question that says, with the pandemic, how is broadcasting and streaming occurring overseas?
What?
Basically, with the pandemic, how is broadcasting and streaming happening?
I can only speak on behalf of C-SPAN. We're very fortunate that our message is able to get out in all different platforms. Especially our coronavirus page is a frequent source of information for many folks, and we're very grateful for that. You can check state by state issues there, and I think more people. The bigger issue with in general with the industry is the cord cutting. So many people are going to different platforms, getting rid of cable in the traditional sense. So C-SPAN's trying to get out on all these different streaming services, and our website, and our podcasts, and our app. So there is I think now more than ever, especially during the pandemic, these type of services are being used, and we're fortunate that many folks are gravitating towards C-SPAN on these different platforms.
And then the next question is from Gail. It says, I'd like to see that slide again about the various news outlets and how they are rated as far as being neutral, skewing left or skewing right. Where can I find that information? So that's basically, you probably have to Google it, but it was basically from the media watchdog Ad Fontes. We'll get you that information. We'll definitely send that to you.
Yeah, Gail, it was an independent media. The Ad Fontes is a media, they look at media bias, and so they have many different categories, and we'll send you, when I send that email to Taylor to get out, I'll send you how that came about. That's no problem at all. We were glad we were on that, but it wasn't our doing. It was something done by their media organization, looking at many different factors. And then I see one on here. I think the C-SPAN archives are at Purdue. Do you know if the archives are available online and searchable? The answer is yes. The archives did start at Purdue University. And then after many years, they moved off of the campus, but they're still at the Purdue Industrial Park. So we have a small office, the Purdue Archives in West Lafayette, where all the archives are stored. But the great news is that 263,000 hours of content now is available online at your fingertips. So if you go to our homepage, you'll see the video library. You can type in whatever topic you're interested in. You can type in Indianapolis, type in Congress, governors, and it pops all that content. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful research tool. It's actually currently maintained. The head of that is Dr. Browning, who was a former Purdue professor, one of my old professors, and now it's something he saw value in it, and he's heading up the C-SPAN archives currently. But it's a great, our students use it, teachers use it for lesson plans, about classroom resources. Viewers, organizations use it to watch their CEOs that have been on C-SPAN, to see industry trends. But it's all free. Just go to our homepage. And because our philosophy, it's your government in action. Whatever we cover, we're not trying to make a profit of it. We're just letting you see it as a public service because it's your government. But good question.
And then there's another one that says, did Doug have a mentor growing up who inspired him to work in this facet of the media as opposed to more partisan outlets? Lamita, I'm not sure if that's you, but I just see Steele.
It's yes, actually, when I was at Purdue University, Brian Lamb, the founder and CEO of C-SPAN, Lamita, he spoke to our junior class. I was in a reporting class, and on my junior year of college, and he spoke to a bunch of us, and then we were at the Purdue Union, taught, and he had some incredible advice. And I was one of those nerds that actually watched C-SPAN because I'm from the DC area originally before I went out to Purdue. So I knew about C-SPAN. One of the few people at that time, at least my age, I think, that was actually watching it and watching the government in action. So when I went to Purdue and I actually heard him speak, I said, wow, that was a field I wanted to get into anyway. And it married my passion for politics and media together. So I wasn't able to get a job right away, but I kept in touch, and it took me a while, but I finally got to C-SPAN. I've been there 21 years and I love it. So, but yeah, he was definitely a mentor. I loved his philosophy. I loved the fact that the idea of C-SPAN was never to be part of the story. And if they are part of the story, we did something wrong. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and for me, I'll just say that I've only been at C-SPAN for a little over a year, and I know normally people are like, hey, you don't look like, you're old enough to be there, but I actually am. I basically grew up in the Washington area, and of course, I was born in DC, and I was raised by my grandmother, and C-SPAN was kind of forced on me, but it grew on me. And, teaching for over 13 years, I definitely learned so much. But at one point in my life, I was just like, a little over a year ago, I was just like, it's time for a change. And what do you know, I ended up at C-SPAN. And the thing is, it's a little bit different in the sense that, growing up, like I said, you end up with a parent who says, watch this, watch that. But then when it becomes a part of you and, you get that yearning to learn about politics and different things like that, it's really many different avenues that we all end up coming into C-SPAN. So no one really in the same lane.
And I see another, Roger, asked, what has been the most memorable events, meetings that you've covered with C-SPAN? For me, it's so many. It's whether it's inauguration or a election night, it's just great seeing the process, not being part of the process. Let me be clear, but also covering the process. I really enjoy seeing what. There's so many stories that have been fascinating, and again, our American history programming. We're not all political programming. Our American history programming TV, our department's had an opportunity to be at many of these historical sites and locations around the country. And it's been a chance for me to just revisit history every day. I took it in college and, I loved it. And but to actually see it in person, it's been fun. Sometimes I pinch myself because you're paying me to go see these historical sites and put it on TV and make it available to teachers. So I think a lot of the historical programs have been some of my highlights to cover. And another question from Diane. Ever consider politics as a career? No. The answer is no. That after being around it for 21 years, the answer is no. Let me say, I do appreciate the fact that whatever side you're on, I'm one of those guys. Whatever side you're on, that's great. I appreciate the fact that you guys they have the passion and ability to stand up and put themselves out there. So I really admire the fact that they're doing that. But I just don't have the desire to do that. So that's a good question. And then Trina also asked, what are a few of the topics seem to resonate the most with students currently? During this last year, during the student camp competition, a lot of the questions were civil rights during the contest. They put in, that was one of the biggest topics that in our contest. They entered and they did videos on that, but they could have done it on many things. But so I would say based off of last year, civil rights and freedom, civil liberties were two of the most common themes that we've seen with high school students. But that's, I think right now, Eric, those are all the questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? I know we've taken up a lot of your time. I want to be respectful of the time limit. I
just want to know, what's the staffing like at C-SPAN? What's your format as far as writers and who's producers and who's going out? Just a little idea.
We only have 254 employees at our network, so we're a very small national network. You know, the CNN bureau down the street and other bureaus, Washington bureaus that are right near us are much, much bigger just for their Washington bureaus. But so what we do is we average probably 3 or 4 people per, or 5 people per unit. Now in April and I's position, we actually travel on the C-SPAN bus.
Yeah.
And that's where we travel. The bus is on the road 11 months out of the year, and we'll go to many different events during the week. So it just depends on resources, but we try to maximize our resources in Washington. Whatever events are in Washington, we're going to capture.
Okay.
But we're also, you know, we're also limited by the resources as well.
Yeah.
But each unit, our political unit, every 4 years, we're ramps up. We'll switch people over into the political unit. That's a small unit, but come election year, we double that size. Not double it, but we add extra editors and camera people and technicians to cover all the different campaign events that we're covering. So I would say it just depends on the year and the situation.
Okay.
Yeah, during this time of year, we would have been on the road, you know, at different rallies and different things like that. But of course, because of the times, we're here with you virtually. So yeah, this has been what we've been doing since we've not been able to travel with the bus.
And, you know, everyone's working from their home right now. This past year is, they're doing interviews. Like, for example, they're doing freshman congressman and congresswoman orientation videos. So if you go to the website, you can see all the incoming videos of newly elected officials, and that's our political crews gathering that as we speak. So they'll be ready for when the Congress starts, the 117th Congress starts. But that's just an example of what, you know, priorities like covering. Our political crew is now doing virtual interviews from home.
Okay.
So Doug, just so we had you scheduled till 12:55, Doug. So we're going to keep picking your and April brains.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'll say it's a first that C-SPAN's actually shorter. That, you know, we're brief. That's a first actually. Usually we run long, as you guys may know.
This is a long form interview. We're just going to keep it going. No. So today in the news, there's 43 states are suing Facebook to break up Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. So if you all have not necessarily monopoly, but you've chosen to have the uninterrupted feeds for those outlets, from your position of a company like Facebook tentatively controlling communications, like how would you kind of touch on that? Where you've got a company with 3 billion monthly users who can remove posts and classify posts as false news. How, do you think it would be for the greater good to break up a global tech company like that, or would you prefer not to answer it and keep your agnostic? Yeah.
Do we have any other questions out there? I'll wait for no, I'm just kidding. No, Eric, that's a very good question. And what I'll say to that, it's a very important question. I will say C-SPAN's approach to that is that they're passionate about both sides. Many people, and our philosophy has been to be transparent and cover all that. In fact, that last, you saw that last slide where Ted Cruz during my presentation was, that was actually at a hearing when we brought all the tech companies together. Our philosophy is, hey, this is what's going on. What is your government doing in regards to that? So I think from our perspective, it's very important for us to cover how they're doing it, why they're doing it, but it's through the government. You know, what's the government doing about it? That's always going to be our approach. Not how we feel about it, but what if we stick to our mission of saying, hey, this is definitely an issue. And the government feels it's an issue, so we're going to cover these hearings, and we've covered extensively. You can watch that hearing where they brought Mark Zuckerberg up and they grilled him for hours, and it was fascinating. And the tech companies admitted that they're making changes and doing stuff like that. Our philosophy is to kind of stay out of that battle, but also make sure that we're covering why that battle's happening. So that's what I'll say to that. It's an easy answer. C-SPAN's just going to, you know, cover the process and let's see how the government's handling that.
Anybody else?
I see from Diane said, do we partner with any print publications or newspapers? Diane, that's a really good question. As far as partnering, you know, I mentioned we only have 254 employees. So we're small as a national network, but what we do, we cover a lot of events around the country outside the Beltway. And especially today during the pandemic, we covered a lot of campaign events and rallies, even though we weren't traveling. But in order to do that, we partner with the local affiliates, the ABC, NBC, and CBS to help us gather that content. Because, you know, news gathering is expensive. So we did partner up with them. We would tap into their feed and say, if we couldn't cover an event, and say this was done by ABC, but we'll bring it to you, know, we'll show it. And we'd also simulcast, for example, on the weekends, we simulcast all the Washington news programs, like, you know, Washington Today, all the Sunday news talk shows, we simulcast them on C-SPAN radio. So we do partner in a lot of ways to give you a flavor of what's going on in different media. But having said that, the caveat is we're not going to take an event from another company if it's not shot properly, C-SPAN style. If someone sends us something and they have editing going on and different camera views that aren't, you know, capturing what we think is good, it has to have a C-SPAN standard. And most networks do, you know, they're trying to do a great job of it, but C-SPAN's a little bit unique. We're not just going to take a feed if we don't think it, if we think it's biased in how they're covering it and how they're editing it. So we're very careful about that. But if it's just a campaign event, you want to hear the entire speech, we'll pull that feed. So there is some partnering. But that's a great question.
Now, Doug, you mentioned how C-SPAN is funded from the satellite and cable providers. Is it hard to maintain that funding? I mean, being in DC with politics, everyone's going to be pulling for their bigger slice. How would you kind of describe how you're able to maintain your autonomy?
That's a good question, Eric. Currently, right now, our budget averages out to about 6.5 cents per subscriber. If you subscribe to cable and satellite, about 6.5 cents goes to C-SPAN, and it's been that way for years. And Lamita may know this as cable, you know, for example, ESPN and other networks charge, you know, $10 per subscriber or other, you know, lots of money per subscriber, but that's our only budget. We don't make anything off commercials on the back end where it's really lucrative. It's all based off subscriber fees. But with people cutting the cord, that's the other issue, Eric. You know, the cable industry has really switched and people are going on many different streaming platforms, websites, podcasts, lots of different ways to get their information. So that has affected us a lot. We have lost subscribers overall, but what we're doing is we're trying to get on all the different platforms. We're working hard to get on these platforms. But like I said, everything's available and online on our video library I mentioned earlier. And we also, to be totally transparent, we do have some advertising on our digital platforms only. We started that recently. If you go to C-SPAN, our websites, you'll see some advertising just on the sites off to the side.
Just limited advertising.
Limited advertising just to offset some of that. And all that goes back into our programming, but it's also just, you know, only on our digital platforms, only on our website, and that's by design.
And I have another question on that note. Does C-SPAN kind of get riled up about the ratings like the other? I mean, I imagine with C-SPAN being so non-biased, I think everyone's a little bit more relaxed in that, but I'm not quite sure what C-SPAN's approach is to ratings and what your goal is as far as appealing to I know that it's to make it fair, but how do you attract all viewers then with making it?
You know, as far as the great thing is we're not tied into the Nielsen rating system. We don't take Nielsen ratings at all. What we do is take a survey every 4 years just to see what our audience is and what, you know, and you'd be surprised. It's pretty much split across the board as far as political leanings and age groups. It's pretty even. But by not being part of the Nielsen ratings, it allows us to show things just unfiltered and unedited. So you're right, we're pretty late. We're not gonna cover, people turn on C-SPAN, you may see a hearing that's going on for 2 or 3 hours and you're like, wow, why are they still showing this? Well, our philosophy is simple. That's your government action. Sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it's not. So yeah, we're not, do we want people to watch this? Of course we do, but but we're also not going to, our mission's everything to us and our credibility. So if we're not going to break away from a hearing just to go cover something that everyone else is covering because we think it's more exciting, then we lose our integrity, and we don't want to do that. So, but yeah, no Nielsen ratings, just a survey that we do. And you can go online to our website and find out more information about our viewership. And it's very across the board, pretty moderate, conservative, liberal. It's split, and age group. Everyone thinks C-SPAN's a network for the older population, but college students are using it a lot for research and for papers, and we're very pleased with the age group range, the age range.
So then, just to kind of follow up with Roger Cummins' question about memorable experiences in C-SPAN. So April and Doug, when was the last time you were just totally surprised, or not necessarily shocked, but when was the last time you were glad that the cameras were rolling when something unexpected happened?
Well, C-SPAN's caught a lot of those hot mic moments. We definitely have. When you see other news networks talk about a hot mic moment, it's probably because it happened at C-SPAN because it was a hearing that nobody expected, people to watch or be interested in. We caught the moment. So for me, I just think it's on the campaign trail when I can name too many examples, but you're on, they'll come up and talk to individuals and they think they're off mic. And it's happened many times on C-SPAN where the congressman or congresswoman will say something and not realizing C-SPAN still, after the event's over, we don't cut away. We stay on for 5 minutes afterwards to see what the room's looking like. So we've caught a lot of hot mic moments, and it's like good and bad. I mean, some of it's really neat. You see how they interact with the viewers and constituents. That's fun to see. But I can count many examples where just having the camera on or just staying on afterwards has been great. You've caught some memorable moments.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, mostly during the campaign trail. It's just is what it is. You see it and you hear it as it happens.
Eric, I'll give you the quick example, and this goes way back in the election where Michael Dukakis was running for president, and he was out in the armory. He was talking to his viewers at night in Iowa, at the Iowa caucuses, in an armory with a bunch of students, his supporters. And he came out and he was gung-ho, and it became known as the scream speech. I think many of you may remember he went out and was like yelling. And if you watched it and you heard it, it sounded kind of okay, that's odd. But when you're there, it was just, he was trying to get people fired up, and it didn't really register. But then we got back to our hotel, and that night, David Letterman had a field day with it. They were making fun of Dukakis in that speech. And the more you started watching, you're like, well, that was kind of odd. But again, it was taken out of context, and that is not Republican or Democrat. It was just funny. It was one of those moments where like, wow, that's C-SPAN was there to capture, and it took on a life of its own. And then a couple of days later, he was, basically out of the campaign. But even though the thing that was lost in that example was that he finished third. He was firing. He was the front runner going in. He finished third, and that kind of he lost some momentum. But that's a case of where the mic took something and ran with it.
April, anything hilarious you want to potentially ruin your career with, Sharon?
No, for me, like I said, it's just usually on the campaign trail. There's all sorts of things that happens, and you just stay wide-eyed and let the mic play and just let it be.
We appreciate your time very much. And Doug, with some of those answers, I think you do have a future in politics, so don't rule that out entirely. And thank you again very much.
I don't know how to take that, Eric.
So again, thank you very much for your time today. So, Doug, we're going to email you a certificate of appreciation. A donation will be made in your name to Project 44, an Indianapolis-based nonprofit created to raise awareness of the National Bone Marrow Donor Registry. We will be hosting another Zoom meeting next week, December 17th, the 7th night of Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts tonight. Rabbi Sandy Sasso, children's book author, will be our speaker. And again, April and Doug, thank you very much for your time. When the world reopens up, we hope to take you to the Army-Navy Club, maybe at some point in the future when our life takes us back out to the East Coast. But again, Merry Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah to everybody. Merry early Christmas, Happy holidays, and everybody have a nice rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a great week and enjoy the holidays. Take care and stay safe, everyone.
You too. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, President. Good to be here. We are here today. Thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Eric, oh, you just left. Taylor, I'll go ahead and send you a quick email tomorrow, like the wrap-up email I promised in the presentation. I'll send it to you and Eric just to get out to the folks.
Perfect. Yep. We will send it out probably on Monday in our newsletter. So that'll be perfect.
Perfect.
So, thank you again. That was really fun.
Thank you, Taylor.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, April. You guys did great. So appreciate it.
Happy holidays. Boiler up.
Boiler up.
Hey, April, before you leave, what's your last name?
Ranger, like
Ranger?
Power Ranger, Walker, Texas Ranger.
That
Yeah.
sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you both
Thank
of you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.